Stop what you're doing and listen carefully because what you're going to hear isn't simply another echo chamber of crazy speculation, a repeated Moonboy fantasy, or another crypto forecast. You're about to hear a thorough examination of a structural fact that comes from the top echelons of international finance, the corridors where trillion-dollar choices are made, and the organizations that influence markets, liquidity, and the flow of capital around the globe. A truth that leads to one inevitable conclusion. At $60,000, XRP is not a projection, a fantasy, or a wish. If the world is really heading toward a tokenized economy, it is a basic requirement. Examining the words and deeds of one of the most powerful financial leaders currently living, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, who manages over $10 trillion in assets and whose goal of tokenizing the world is in complete harmony with the features integrated into the XRP ledger, makes this necessity abundantly evident. As we examine his claims, his approach, and the worldwide market he is driving toward digitization, suddenly the prospect of XRP hitting $10,000 seems insignificant. At $60,000, XRP ceases being a moonshot and becomes something the financial system might genuinely need when positioned as a global settlement asset in a world moving toward immediate tokenized value transfer. Let's start this trip by adopting the perspective of those in charge of the global financial system. These are people and organizations that plan for decades, even centuries ahead of time. Instead of responding to the news cycle, they influence it, avoid chasing hype, and design the infrastructure that future generations will depend on. Furthermore, these organizations are announcing a seismic shift that will completely alter the structure of international markets when they discuss tokenization, not cryptocurrency, memo coins, or speculative assets. Tokenization is the next generation of markets, according to Larry Fink, who has been very outspoken about this. Consider that. In addition to lauding blockchain technology, the CEO of the biggest asset manager in history is predicting tokenization as the next big thing in finance. This indicates right away that tokenized liquidity rails are a question of when rather than if. And it becomes clear that high-speed, interoperable, and regulatory-friendly settlement assets are required when you combine this with the enormous inefficiencies present in the current global financial system, such as multi-day settlement periods and trillions of dollars stuck in Nostro accounts. This is precisely where XRP comes into play, not as a speculative coin, but rather as a technology that was created from the ground up to serve as a bridge asset between networks, institutions, currencies, and now tokenized real-world assets. In contrast to Ethereum, which developed into a decentralized smart contract platform, or Bitcoin, which was designed to function independently of institutions, XRP was first developed to address a trillion-dollar institutional issue involving worldwide liquidity and settlement. This is significant because the future Larry Fink envisions involves tokenizing trillions of dollars worth of assets that must be rapidly transferred between networks, nations, and asset classes. Liquidity needs to be scalable, efficient, and interoperable in order to achieve this. This isn't just theoretical. Tokenized deposits, tokenized treasuries, tokenized real estate, tokenized derivatives, tokenized commodities, and even tokenized carbon credits have already been discussed by banks and regulators. Everything that is worth now turns into a digital token in the future. And in order to enable global throughput, the settlement layer, the asset that transfers all of this value, must have a sufficient supply and valuation. The math becomes astounding at that point. Take the ISDA market, a worldwide derivatives market with a notional value of more than 1.2 quadrillion. The settlement asset needs to have a market cap that can handle that traffic, even if you believe that just a small percentage of this market is tokenized, and that only a small amount of that passes through the XRP ledger. To put it another way, if the global financial system shifts to digital settlement, the settlement token's value must increase to accommodate the demands of the system as a whole. Honestly, there comes a time when price forecasts are no longer the main focus. It becomes an issue of systemic liquidity needs. Imagine for a moment that every day, trillions of dollars worth of value pass via digital pipelines. Consider those enormous flows that require immediate bridging between various tokenized assets. The asset's price would need to be high enough to avoid liquidity constraints if XRP were to manage even a small portion of that volume. For example, 10 XRP or even 1,000 XRP would not be sufficient. Almost immediately, liquidity would disappear, but a 60,000 XRP. All of a sudden, the statistics start to make sense, and the market capitalization can support the velocity of value transfer required for international financial settlement. At that point, the notion of XRP at $60,000 ceases to seem absurd and instead begins to sound like the kind of price level institutions could actually require to effectively manage a tokenized economy. This is the time to reintroduce Larry Fink. He talks about tokenization with the assurance of someone working toward a definite goal. BlackRock is building the framework for the next financial age, not experimenting with digital assets. They have developed platforms for cross-market interoperability, institutional liquidity access, tokenization infrastructure, and digital asset custody. These experiments are not minor ones. They serve as the foundation for a new financial environment in which currencies, assets, risks, and derivatives all move as real-time digital token settlements, and which digital content already satisfies the system's standards. Which network is already built for institutional use, high throughput, low cost, and regulatory alignment. The ledger for XRP. Larry Fink is expressing the precise issue that XRP was designed to address when he discusses the inefficiencies in the current system and the requirement for immediate settlement. He is describing a world in which assets flow across ledgers when he talks of tokenizing everything from equities to bonds to securities. Additionally, institutions that tokenize assets will require a worldwide bridge that is sufficiently liquid to manage settlement flows. One of the few assets that is truly intended to fulfill this function is XRP. Let's pause to examine the nature of financial evolution as we go with this investigation. Few individuals truly grasped the significance of the internet when it was initially developed. The majority of people simply ignored email when it first appeared. Many people believed that smartphones were superfluous when they first came out. Every technological revolution, however, was accompanied by organizations, governments, banks, and companies that were getting ready for a future that most people couldn't yet envision. The next revolution is tokenization, and to be honest, a global settlement asset will be part of the infrastructure that drives this revolution. Because it blends speed, efficiency, regulatory routes, interoperability, and scarcity, XRP is in a unique position to be that asset. This is how we came to believe that XRP will hit $60,000. Not as hype, but to be honest, as a necessary result of the demand for liquidity around the world. Without a settlement layer that can truly scale to accommodate that flow, it is simply impossible to tokenize trillions of dollars worth of assets. An asset that is too inexpensive, too sluggish, or just too scarce to run a global system isn't actually viable. The price is merely forced upward by the liquidity math. This leads us back to Larry Fink's contribution to this future, The world is getting closer to tokenization with every comment he makes. The basis for digital settlement is strengthened by each infrastructure investment made by BlackRock. Trillions of dollars are being moved toward a tokenized future with each collaboration and system they implement. The fundamental question is not whether tokenization will be used globally, but rather when. The assets that act as settlement layers will thereafter become the foundation of the world economy. A significant price revaluation is not only feasible, but also, practically inevitable if XRP is one of those assets, and, all the indicators do point in that direction. Finance is going digitized, liquidity will be automated, and settlement will happen instantly. Additionally, XRP at $60,000 becomes a figure that makes sense at last in that scenario. Please hit the like button and include the hashtag necessary in the comments if you think that the tokenization of the world makes this possible. Additionally, don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss the next big update on the development of digital money. Disclaimer. Please keep in mind that I do not hold a financial advisor license. These videos' content is solely intended for viewing enjoyment. Before making any financial decisions, I always advise viewers to do their own research and speak with experts. Many thanks for listening. Please remember to hit the subscribe button and give the video